Hey everybody, it's Sarah. I'm going to give you a quick discussion of presentation aids today, and hopefully this will be helpful for you as you prepare for any upcoming presentations in the future. So let's start out by talking a little bit about how good presentation aids can make a huge difference when you're delivering a speech. I like to use this example because it just gives me an extra opportunity to talk about Ireland, which is one of my most favorite places in the whole wide world. But let's say I was giving a presentation and I was trying to evoke some mental imagery for you all. I could say something like, "Green are the hills of Ireland, and green they will always stay. Warm are the blessings wished for you, and they'll always be that way." You know, it's a really nice little lovely kind of Irish poem, and maybe you get an idea of what the countryside kind of looks like. Or I can add a picture, some kind of visual representation, and that can add even more layers of depth, an additional layer of depth to the presentation. So you've got flexibility, and I think either is fine. Um, just provided you consider how the presentation aid is a supplement to what you're talking about. What are some things that you can use as a presentation aid? One is, of course, you yourself as the speaker. You can actually demonstrate, you could wear specific kind of clothing. What you do whenever you're the presenter can make a difference, and it can technically count as a presentation aid as long as it's something different than what the normal expectations are. An example I have is I had a student who was talking about why you should join show choir, and she wore her show choir outfit during the presentation. It was kind of a fun way to show exactly what she was talking about. You could also have an assistant. Let's say you're talking about the importance of learning self-defense techniques, and you want to have somebody come up and kind of interact or play out some different scenarios with you. An assistant would be a presentation aid in that instance as well. Anytime you have an object that you're thinking about passing around, let's say it's a medal or a souvenir or some kind of snow globe or whatever, something that you want to pass around and let your audience get their hands on, I think that that's a really good tactile experience for your audience. It provides them a whole other sensory experience to have while they're listening to you speak. That being said, you want to consider, if you pass it around, think about the possibility that someone could break it or potentially damage it. If you don't pass it around, it needs to be large enough that you holding it at the front means that it can still be visible to everybody else in the room. Similar kind of guidelines here with printed materials. If you're going to show something like a big chart or a picture, it needs to be large enough that everybody in the room can see it, or you pass it around. The other alternative is that you create a handout that is designed to be given and given to your audience without any expectation that it comes back to you. You can also show any kind of videos. I've got DVDs on here, but maybe I should change that to just Blu-rays or streaming. YouTube is a great source for this. You can go make sure the clip is available, check it beforehand, make sure there's nothing offensive, there's no bad video in it, and then just make sure that it's if it's preferable to put captions on or subtitles so that if anybody's got any kind of hearing impairment, they can still understand what's being said in the video. We've got, of course, our old standard PowerPoint or Google Slides or Prezi, any kind of electronic presentation aid like what you're looking at currently. These are very standard, very common, and that's not bad by any means. They're kind of comfortable for us. We know what to expect from them, and so that's totally fine to use that. And of course, any other kind of technology that you might consider, whether it's playing song clips or maybe going to a website, those are things that are fine as well. A couple of general guidelines. You want to make sure wherever you are speaking, this is just good advice in general, that you look at the forum, look at the room before you start giving your presentation. This will help you make sure that if there are any tech issues, let's say you have a PowerPoint that you're trying to use and you realize the screen is actually kind of small, maybe you need to blow up the text to be really large so that it's visible, kind of change your slides around a little. You know, think about that. Is the audio going to carry throughout the room? Check out where you're speaking. You also want to consider doing some, oh, surprise, I would say this, audience analysis to make sure that you understand what your audience is used to, what they might expect, what they're comfortable with. Because if you show them a presentation aid that they're unfamiliar with, they may spend more time obsessing about that, thinking about that, than what you're actually talking about. My example for this, Prezi is like PowerPoint, but it's animated, so the slides kind of move and zoom around and they do all these different things. I would suggest you look into it. It's pretty impressive. The first time I saw a student giving a presentation with one, though, I barely remember what was said because I was sitting there trying to figure out how this presentation was working in the moment. And so it was a little distracting to me. Maybe I was just, you know, being distracted easily that day. I don't know. But think about that while when you're considering what kind of presentation aid to use. Make sure that whatever your presentation is, it's visible if you're choosing to use a visual format of a presentation aid. The same would go with auditory aids, need to be clear enough for everybody to hear. Think about how to control the audience interaction. Do you want them to look at the aid the entire time you're talking, or do you want to only have it available for certain points? Something I liked to say to students in our classroom traditionally is if you weren't using the presentation aid, let's say you had a video, you needed to black out the screen on the projector so that we wouldn't stare at whatever was, on the YouTube screen behind you the entire time. This is a way to control audience interaction, and it's a very savvy tip to do. Thinking about how and when you show that presentation aid really takes you up another level in terms of professionalism. Make sure that you maintain your eye contact with the audience while you are using a presentation aid. Your PowerPoint or Google Slides or whatever are not a substitute for your outline. They are not a substitute for your outline, so you should not put your outline in slide format and then read from your slides while you give your presentation. This is really a support of just this kind of last point, is to remember what is the point of a presentation aid. It is to aid you in your presentation, to supplement the material that you are talking about already with your presentation, not to be the focus of the presentation. A couple more things to think about, and these are a little bit more specific. I want you to really focus on trying to make your presentation aids accessible for all of your audience members. We've talked about this some already, but large font, visibility, audio, if you're going to have any kind of music playing or dialogue in a video, having captions. So just thinking about that accessibility issue and doing the best you can. Practice with your technology, please. Please practice, because sometimes it can take a long time to figure out what's going on with the tech, and that's just time that eats away from your presentation and really doesn't make it flow very well. So go in beforehand and make sure you know what you're doing in terms of how to use the technology. Don't overuse a presentation aid. It's not necessary to have one throughout every single part of your speech. Not every single thing that you say has to be down in a presentation aid. It's just supposed to be supportive. It's just supposed to help. And then you want to also make sure that you limit the text on the slides. If you were using any kind of slide or if you're passing out a handout, you really want to be concise, because if you have too much text, your audience is going to read instead of listening to you. No matter what, it's a great idea to have a backup plan, because you never know what's going to happen the day you end up giving a presentation. It's always super important to have that backup plan in place. If you are accessing any kind of copyrighted materials like clips from TV shows or movies, do make sure that there is permission to show and use that copyrighted material. YouTube's a great way to do this because it's a public domain, especially if you go to, let's say if I'm going to show a clip from Key and Peele. We'll go to the Key and Peele YouTube page, and go through their posted clips. Those are publicly available for use. Make sure you're not reading every single thing on the presentation aid. Your audience is smart. They can probably figure out a lot of what's on there. You are just there. It's a supplement. Again, the presentation aid is a supplement to what you're saying. So you don't have to cover every word for word item on your presentation aid. And then if you're going to do any kind of handwriting, let's say if it's on a chalkboard or a whiteboard, or you've passed out something handwritten, please make sure your handwriting is readable, legible. It's a little concerning whenever your handwriting, isn't conveying the message that you properly want to convey. So we're gonna go ahead and look at a couple of bad slides here. And I wanna give thanks to Drs. Burnett and Singazer, who have posted this great little compilation of images and suggestions online. One of the first things, a lot of times students will ask me, what should I do if I have an image? You do want to provide a citation for it. If it's a hyperlink at the bottom, that's totally fine. And I think it's okay to use smaller font because, again, it's not necessarily the main focus of what your presentation is, but you're still giving credit like, oh, I didn't draw this horrifying picture of a cooked big bird, but I did find it on the internet and here's where I got it from. Think about the color scheme you're using. Whew, boy, my daughter might love this because she's a big fan of hot pink, but this is hard to look at. In addition to the background color being almost offensive, the font color is in the same color family and it makes it doesn't contrast enough to be able to be easily seen. So you want high contrast or difference between the background and the font color. This is also another kind of bad color idea. The gradient looks cool, and really black on blue is okay, I guess. Although it, again, doesn't contrast enough, it doesn't pop out as much. But what's really concerning to me is how that text at the very bottom of the screen is pretty hard to read, and that's because it's darker there, so the colors are closer together. So you want to avoid that as well. Again, this is one of those other super duper bright colors, kind of hard to look at. Please don't, make it so your audience is you're not triggering a migraine or anything for them. Similarly, the background here, too busy. You can't read the text. It's hard to see what's being said. So consider plain, light colored backgrounds, grays, cream colors, things that are not too busy because you don't want it to be too distracting from what you are talking about. Now, the less is more. That's the rule when it comes to text on slides. Definitely use bullet points, totally fine with me, but you really want to make sure you limit the amount of text on slides. Like this is an acceptable amount. This is not. Oh boy, this is a lot. Now you could talk about all of that information while you have an image. Oh, it's a funny, Halloween decoration or whatever. It's a pumpkins or a butt. But you don't have to, this is much more visually pleasing to look at versus all of that text. So let's see, I think I've got a couple more slides to talk about. Now this one is not the worst. It kind of reminds me of the video that was posted in our discussion boards from this week because it's black and white, but it's got a lot of text. So cut half of that text off the screen. That would be my preference. This is cool looking, but it is very busy and almost kind of jarring to your eyes. So think about what is the purpose and making sure that image that you're sharing in your presentation aid is still helpful. Again, this bright color, every time I pop these up, I've used this before. I'm always like physically moving away from it because it's so much, it's too loud. This is again a pretty cool looking background, but oh look, see what's happening, how the white background, parts of the white background are actually making the white text harder to see. So you want to avoid that as well. Okay, a couple of bad animations to go through here. These are all like PowerPoint options, but man, they are not necessary because look, this one kills me. It is so slow. Think about how this would kill the flow of your presentation, right? And with that in mind, we're just going to kind of zip through some of these because I think you all get the idea here that there is really no need to share or use all these crazy animations. Okay. So that is going to really wrap up my presentation for you today. If you've got questions that are specific to your presentation aid, feel free to reach out to me and let me know. I'm more than happy to answer any questions I can. If you have any other questions about class or anything, you can also let me know that. I hope you all are doing really well and staying safe, and I will see you soon.